But yeah, if you go to metabase.imperial.edu and then you'll hit the login page first. So if you type in your email and password, you should be able to log in. Um, and I think you all have the needed access into it. Um, there's a situation that, well, there's another situation that cropped up earlier, um, which was related to student emails. And that issue was, I guess, it's more of a browser issue, but I don't think it's an issue in Internet Explorer actually. So that might be another reason why. But the mail to hyperlink to do the email of a class, it does have a limitation where if it's a really long or a big class with more than 70, I think students, Alex was saying, that's when it runs into an issue where that link no longer works. So for those staff secretaries that kind of are dependent on using that option for, I guess, informing a class, maybe if an instructor is unavailable, um, it kind of stinks for the larger classes because that link doesn't work, right? And I think put this together. It says 2 years ago, but um, this one kind of replicates the query that would be used, and you could pop in the term and CRN and get the values. It's not presented in the nicest way. It's super huge, but if you triple click on it, you could essentially copy it all and share that with the individual. Maybe, unless this one is broken too, which it might have been. So maybe Alex's version or solution to that one was a better one. Because I can't tell whether or not this one has all the students in it or not. But anyway, that's just one example. Um, one thing that I kind of used it for a little bit was this banner kind of metadata area. And that was partially because I didn't always know like what forms went with a table. And, if you're talking with end users, a lot of times, well, they just know the forms. Um, I know there's ways in admin pages, I guess, to do get some more detail. But since I'm not usually in Banner that often, having a quick kind of way to do it was nice. And then sometimes I would go and take looks, deeper dives into like other stuff that I was curious about. So that's where a lot of these questions came from. Um, let me see. So if I plug in SSB sect here, hopefully it shows something. So with this query here, which was a question, but written in just a custom way where you're just writing your own query, basically, which we're used to. Um, this is the response that it comes back with. So it's kind of a nice little reverse search, to see some of the forms that are associated with that table. Yeah, and some of these are related to me asking a question. They're in the Aleutian support line and getting an answer back from them. So these are using tables that, like, even now I don't even remember using them, right? Like I just used them for a couple of these queries and that was it. But there's the GUB help, I guess, and GUB objects. So I guess these have some of that metadata that's needed. So that's how this query came about. But for us, right, like if we just come here to ask a question, we have three options: the simple question, the custom question, and the native query. Most of us would probably just lean towards the native query because, especially with all the joins and all the stuff that we typically have to do, um, that's a lot better. But I think I have some tracker ones. Okay. I'm just seeing if I have ones that aren't written as just straight up SQL. Um, just to have it as an example. So back when we first started using Metabase, or when I saw it and kind of heard about it, what was kind of neat was that it really presented itself as as a system of the people, let's say, right? Where we would have our regular users on campus, just like Argos, right? Like that whole premise of Argos being used by just regular folks on campus and not needing to be that technical, which is, in our environment is tends to be a lie, right? But um the this is how it was presented, right? So it was with people just coming into the system and being able to go, oh, I want to talk or write a question about people. And then from here, maybe I want to do some more advanced stuff. So click on some things and break out by category, by name. And let's say, like that you could do all this kind of stuff with it. This is probably not the best example. Um, so this one's more advanced, I think. So if we click on sample data set again, people. So this one actually lets us start doing joins and stuff. So let's see, custom column, join data. Let's say we want to connect people with orders and on, so person ID and order user ID would be how that gets joined. And then they kind of have a preview of that. And then maybe want to filter on, I don't know, email and maybe this Boer guy. And they've improved this since we first started using it. So let's say we want that filter and then you preview it again. So now we just get those results rather than more results, let's say. And then you could start doing the groupings, like maybe we just want to group it by, a lot of that's going to be the same. Maybe by the order ID. Yeah. I'm bad at this part of it because I don't use it that much for this type of stuff, but that's kind of how it was presented, right? That we have that ability for regular users to just kind of come in and use the system. Where this breaks down really badly is with Banner, right? Because Banner has a bajillion schemas. Um, so like for example, like me, like I don't know that Spriten is in Bannonst one, let's say, or some other schema. Like we just typically refer to things by the table name. So what made this pretty unusable is that I would have to know what schema my table belongs to first, and then maybe find it in here. And I'm still not even in the right spot yet. So maybe I have to use a different table that, I don't know, is in here. Um, but that's what made this part challenging because I'm not used to going through things by schema and then table like that. So it kind of messes with the whole process for me. So really what we use it for is just these native queries. And then in this case, we would already have written it, let's say in SQL Developer, and then we plug it in here. And then the only other things would be if we want to take advantage of their variable option over here. So to create a variable, you just add it in like that with that little syntax. And once you've done that, then you could do some extra configuration or just maybe say G number for that one, make it required. Um, let's say, uh, and just with that, we should be able to create one that has I'm going to guess that there's a 1766, but maybe not. Okay. So So that's a quick query that's taken in a variable, and then you have this. So you end up creating all these questions, right? So that's like stage one. But then from there, if you have something that's returning quite a bit of data, then that's where the visualizations would come into play. And that's really where I would say a lot of that work that Oliver's been doing the last couple years is probably the best uh, example of something that where they've been creating the dashboards, right? And I think I have to go under other users down here. So I'd have to click on Oliver if I can find him in the list down
So,
here.
Omar, do you have to provide much support or changes on Metabase?
In terms
Or
of just like the backend updates or like with users?
I guess both. Uh,
Okay.
I mean, I mean, in the sense of what kind of support do you have to do in
Yeah.
general? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, overall, I would say there's zero support because
Okay.
Oliver's pretty much, already knows what like his stuff that he's been doing, right? So he's just kind of adding, I think, uh typically, let's say a copy of last year's if he needs to make a new one for this year of a dashboard, right? That he
Oh,
already has. So all that is pretty minor, I would say. And like I said, like he's really the only real user that I know of that logs in and is making stuff in there. I know Alex and I have done some smaller kind of experiments, and I would try and do certain things in here at times too, just to kind of add to that usage or trial of it. But aside from Oliver's use, which is probably the only real production use case I could think of, um, I just keep an eye on the releases to see if there is a release that's new. Um, and if there is, that's typically when I kind of go through the update procedure I shared. That so I have kind of like a little how to on that one, but that one's pretty quick generally. And the updates aren't usually done right away. It kind of just depends on when I check and
okay.
yeah. So from that perspective, yeah, there's not much in the way of support. That would mainly come up if we hit the sort of Argos type dependency, right? Where you really had a lot of people, because that's the other part, and this is something that we're not taking advantage of at all at this present moment, which is that we could have a bunch of users logging into it on a regular basis, let's say, and then assigning them to groups, and then assigning those groups, let's say, permissions to the databases, um, and limiting that access and doing all that kind of extra level of configuration, um, which occurs at the data level. So that would give them access to actually do their own queries in the databases, or it could just be very limited at a collection level. So one thing that Alex and I kind of were toying with for a hot second there was just maybe creating some for human resources, let's say, where maybe a lot of their common things are just already covered in that area, and they would be able to log in and see their human resources folder and then kind of click in and use those questions that have already been made, which is more akin to like how people use Argos, right? Like where they log in, they see their reports, and then they go and use those reports. So that sort of usage could occur, but I know on the other side of it, a lot of the things that Argos likely does well in terms of like the output it generates, you're not going to have that, let's say, same level of refinement on in this tool, right? It's going to just be more for like the web-based usage, and then maybe downloading like a CSV of that, what's presented, but you're not going to have like those printable type reports and those other things that Argos can provide. Um, and that's where the other side of it, right? So that's why like in Oliver's usage, it's mainly been those public dashboards. That's been the main use case.
Right. Okay. Good. Good.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see. These are my dashboards, I guess, but his are a little bit different. Let's see if any of these still work. Okay. So the dashboards are really a combination of multiple questions on the screen, but then the other part of it was that they have the public link capability. So this is really what Oliver's taking advantage of and linking out to there on the IR page. So that way he can share those dashboards publicly. And this is probably the one feature that Argos doesn't have. So that's where that's the main use case for Metabase at the moment.